So in the panel, we've got four people. We've got Todd, Jen, Amal, and Sage. So you guys want to introduce yourself very quickly?
Sure. So I saw you all yesterday. I hope you had a great 2 days. Todd England, Vice President of Product at Progress, working on NativeScript, Convey, Chat, and a number of other things.
Hi, everyone. Hope you had a great conference. I'm Jen Looper. I'm a developer advocate here on the NativeScript team, and I'm founder and CEO of UVixens.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amal Hussain. I'm a software engineer, senior open web engineer at Boku. I work on the web platform on the reliability, standards, and testing side.
And I'm Sage. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Crescendo. We do diversity training in Slack. And I'm also a sort of freelance blockchain developer educator and casual mixed reality developer as well. Context on that is I used to do developer evangelism at Microsoft, focusing on emerging and cloud technologies. So like basically everything new and exciting came to me, which is why I've done a little bit of everything in this like emerging tech space.
Sounds very cool. Okay, so I've got a bunch of questions prepared. We may be able to get a question from the audience, but we'll start with this one. So what is the first thing that you built wearing an engineering hat? You can go all the way back to your childhood.
Like a train engineer?
Like you could build a house or you could build a piece of software, but it kind of has to be something practical.
Practical.
Well, in a very loose.
I can start. For me, I think it was reverse engineering an electrical toothbrush to be like ergonomical for my grandma as a kid. That's what I did. You know, she had
How old were
arthritis.
you?
I was like, I don't know, 13, 14. So I think that was kind of like, it was great. It was like, she had a issue grabbing. And so, it was like, how do we make this better for her? And so it was, just building something so that she could hold it. I feel like I should have patented that, right? So that was mine. Yeah.
That sounds cool.
I think for me, I used to have a light bright set. Does anyone remember these things? Like it's kind of like pixel art. Do they still make them? I'm so excited. And I was really little, and I used to just make little pixel pictures. So I guess that kind of counts as engineering, kind of. At least UX design, UI design.
Yeah.
All right, I'll file that under UI.
I think that counts. That's the combination of technology and liberal arts. That's a good intersection. It's like you're an Apple pioneer.
Right, okay.
I think much like you described, I think I started more about taking things apart than actually putting things together. I remember when I lived in California, I was probably 5 or 6. We went to a rummage sale and bought an old console radio, like the radio that was like the size of a piece of furniture. I remember we got it home, and the first thing we did was plug it in, and it had some radio broadcast that had that day's date, and the radio was very old. And I was amazed that the old radio knew what today's date was. As a kid, I thought old radio would be old radio coming out of old radio. So you start to take things apart, learn how they work. I think that's where the fascination started. But I remember the first thing I made that I can remember was a 2nd grade science project of cooking a hot dog with electricity. I took a board, and I put 2 nails up through it. And I took a plug, and I wired one end to one nail and the other end to the other nail, plugged it in. And it just fried that hot dog across the middle. And somehow my parents let me take this to school, and I didn't hurt anyone dramatically.
Did you eat the hot dog?
Yeah, actually, it's not terrible.
Wow. Sage, you got one?
Maybe not as exciting as that. I think I started out with engineering and development a little bit later than the rest of the folks on the panel. So I actually started with Lego Mindstorms, which is like a Lego-based robotics thing with a drag and drop interface to build stuff. So I built just a ton of little robots that would drive around the house and do random things. And then beyond that, the first time I actually coded something from scratch that was like really cool was this awful game called Happy that was some weird acronym that stood for hot air balloons, apples falling from the sky somehow. And it was like this complex thing where you had to save your family by jumping into the air to catch apples that fell from the sky from hot air balloons. Makes a lot of sense, right?
That's actually pretty cool.
It was built in ActionScript, by the way. Like, yay.
Nice. So following on that, like obviously you started with something, and then throughout your lives you had to learn about new technologies and kind of like always try to keep up with all the changes. So how do you stay current? with what's going on, and how do you discover new things, new ideas, especially if it's outside of your own field?
I read a lot of Reddit. Reddit is a great source of, exciting and skepticism. So I look at what people are talking about, and when something catches my interest, I typically actually propose a talk to a conference and see if anyone bites. Because I find if people want to hear about it, then it's worth building something and it's worth investing time. As the CTO of a startup, it's like just 100% of my time has to go to Crescendo. So it's hard for me to justify taking off my, Slack bot building hat and putting on something like blockchain. But whenever I find that sort of community that's interested in something, then I invest that time into building a demo, to building something, and then bringing people on board to maintain that and move it forward.
Anyone has a different answer?
I'll take a shot. First, I think it's probably a poor assumption to assume I am still current on everything, or that any of us can keep up. I think there's just so much you at some point have to pick. And I actually remember making a choice probably 4 or 5 years now ago where I was trying to keep up with everything, and I realized I just couldn't. And so I had to choose, where do I really care the most, and where will I specialize in what I will choose to keep up with and what I'll choose to just let become interesting, and someone will tell me about it, but I really won't know depth. So one of those choices was I decided I'm not going to be a database expert. I'm not going to keep up with every database change, NoSQL, Mongo. I'll know of them, but I really won't know much about them. And I'll focus on front-end technologies or web technologies. I think you kind of have to pick your discipline and then choose where you're going to be wide and where you're going to be deep. Some people can be deep in a lot of things. They have a lot of time, I guess. But I don't think you have to be current on everything. Where do I get news? I think like anybody, you follow people who highlight and bubble things up that are most interesting. Let them be your sort of gatekeepers to finding stuff if you don't have time to spelunk and find it yourself. But you do have to take time. It takes time to keep up with it all.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to sort of push yourself to look outside of your normal channels. Like, yes, we follow everyone that we follow on Twitter, but it can become a closed loop after a while. Same even with Slack. But I think if you keep an eye on, for example, I'm coming from the Angular world, but jumping into Vue, I was forced to sort of look at what React community does. There is so much tools out there that the React folks are using that Angular folks have never touched. For example, Storybook. And the Vue people tend to be more plugged into that stuff. So it's just sort of like get out of your circle of comfort.
What's Storybook?
It's design pattern making library.
Learned something right
It's
now.
pretty amazing. It's creating design patterns. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, I would just want to kind of echo on what Todd said. FOMO is real. Are you guys familiar with that acronym? Fear of missing out. So especially with technology, I mean, like the web evolves so much, and as web developers, we're kind of really developing for the most hostile environment ever, right? I mean, it's our dependencies are changing, our environments are changing, our runtimes are changing, right? Literally, like the code that we're writing is changing because somebody else I'm gonna submit a pull request, and before I know it, I didn't rebase fast enough, right? And I have a git merge, right? So change is real in our industry. I would say that as engineers, it's really easy to get to feel like you're an imposter, right? Like that's another real a problem in our community, imposter syndrome. I mean, engineers with like 15 years of experience, a master's in computer science, like just like incredible experience, backgrounds that are just feel like, oh my God, I feel like I don't know anything. And it's easy to feel that way when you're constantly seeing new things popping up that you're not an expert on. So I think just like Todd said, you really have to kind of pick your area of expertise, pick what you want to be an expert in, and focus on that. And your craft is something that you are going to be working on. And you just need to know what tools you're going to use and how you're going to solve them, and that's a craft that you're going to like work on every day as an engineer.
Cool. So speaking of toolset, what toolset do you use for like your day-to-day development or general like work in general?
Are you trying to start like a beef before here? It's like VS Code versus WebStorm. Just kidding. No. I use what makes me productive and what tools are like. Tooling is extremely important for productivity. So I think if you're a multi-developer team, it's good to invest in like your ecosystem. So I use an IDE because it's easier for me than Vim. I'm still on WebStorm. I use WebStorm, PyCharm, in the IntelliJ family. But I have for me, it's all about my bash profile. So I have a lot of kind of custom shortcuts for just making me more productive in the terminal, right? Just aliasing things, making sure that I have automated lint on save, and all kinds of things like that help me kind of be more productive. Yeah.
Well, VS Code for me, of course, works nicely, but tools like Code Sandbox for quick prototyping, I was just using it to try to spin up some stuff in the back. I think, anything that makes you productive and looking at what your ecosystem is providing to you in terms of tooling is really helpful. If you want to spin up beautiful docs like we were just talking about with Chris, ViewPress is perfect for this sort of thing. So it's kind of, there's great tooling out there according to which ecosystem you're in.
Yeah, I guess my daily workflow system is email, PowerPoint. I no longer get to claim full-time in the editors, but certainly I spend a lot of time with NativeScript, so NativeScript pulls me into certain sets of tools. VS Code especially, I think, is where I spend most of my time coding. I think, like anyone, I've had a journey. I mean, I've used all kinds of things. Visual Studio for a long time when you're in .NET, and then Sublime, and then you try new things, and I think it's important to try new tools and find if what you've been using is still better than what came next. I mean, always experiment. I do really appreciate that when people share their setups. I mean, one of the most impressive things, I remember all the way back to one of my very first programming jobs, and I did not start life thinking of being a programmer at all. And I worked at a student association as an assistant junior web developer. And I remember looking over at one of the senior guy's monitors, and he had a completely different color scheme in his ID. It's like, you can change the colors? And he's like, oh, yeah, because this color is easier on the eyes. It's like, that makes a lot of sense. I should change the color. I spent the next day just changing colors in my IDE. So, observe what other people are using, learn from them. And there's a lot of people who bring best practices, and you can always learn a new trick on how to make your workflow and your setup better.
I don't know if y'all want to hear the tools that I use, but same VS Code. I went through the whole. I've tried every version of Visual Studio because as a former Microsoft evangelist, you kind of need to know those tools, which also means I'm well versed in Azure. So Crescendo is an Azure shop, for better or for worse. We're still trying to figure that one out. We just recently moved away from VSTS and into the GitHub world, which is a good decision. Now experimenting with different continuous integration tools. So we're looking at Circle CI as a nice way to test everything before it goes live and potentially breaks everything.
I wanted to just add, just something on tooling. This isn't specific to developer tooling, but just in general, you highlighted CI. CI is it's your safety and gate net, right? Like anything that you any nits that that come up in pull requests, just automate that, right? Like if it can be a binary decision made by a computer and you don't have to waste time on it, like you should be doing that. So that's a huge productivity hack, right? And so let somebody fix the build on their own machine before they're ready for a human to spend expensive time reviewing it. So so take that's a good area to look for opportunities to kind of improve overall team productivity.
Cool. So my next question, so when you work on a new product or a new solution or maybe a next big release, what techniques or methodologies do you use to decide what is the best feature or the things that you should implement in there so that you can make sure that people on the other side they can benefit the most of it from it?
Well, I was instantly reminded of how I interface with people who use my one app in production that actually has users, which is Practice Buddy. It's an app that allows music students and their teachers to integrate with to interface with each other. The kids are recording little snippets of their practice sessions, and the teachers are giving them feedback and giving them stickers and writing comments. And I have a nice feedback loop with my customers. So I think really when you're talking about product development, it's all about talking to your customers. I think Jeff Welpley's probably has really a great list of tools. So take a look for his slides. He's got a lot of resources right there.
I mean, I'll take the view of what we do at Progress and my history with Telerik shipping things. There are a lot of different signals that inform what should come in your next version of your product or your roadmap. And balancing those signals is actually a pretty challenging job because it can be very conflicting stakeholders, what the business needs, what your most vocal customers need, what your best paying customers need, what your dev team needs to do to make the product more easy to maintain. So, that is the value of having really solid product managers involved, is someone who can commit the time and the cycles to weigh the various inputs, the various signals, and decide really what should be most prioritized for a release cycle. And I've seen teams evolve, and this is an evolutionary process, usually figuring out how to weigh those signals properly. But the source for the input can be many. I mean, it's everything, like you said, the tools, the user voice, the voting, the emails. I mean, all kinds of things come in. They just have to be synthesized into what you prioritize most. You're trying to sell, you're trying to please, you're trying to become more efficient. That's how it works.
So being a 6-person team, which includes only 2 developers, we have to plan and plan and plan to make sure that everything is doable within like a 1-week sprint and actually has a meaningful impact on the things that we're measuring. So we do a lot of measuring of our goals and our KPIs. And right now our main focus at Crescendo is how much are people engaging with this one particular part in our content delivery system, which is the feedback votes. So everything that we're doing, everything we're building is with that particular point in mind. So it helps a lot when you have limited dev resources to pick one specific thing that you're tracking, that you're trying to improve and increase, and like focus all your prioritization and your dev efforts on building features that will improve that one metric. And then once you accomplish that, move on to the next metric and so on.
Okay, cool. So the next question, so this being jsMobileConf, I should ask some mobile-related questions. And very often, that's actually something I hear a lot, is like, comparing NativeScript React Native to maybe PWAs or like versus just general web. Like, what is your opinion in terms of like in the battle? Are we in a place where you should pick a side, or do you think that there is space for both, or like how do you see it personally?
Yeah, that's a Todd question.
Pick a side. Pick it now. Pick the wrong side, you can leave. No, I mean, I think as software developers, we love to pick sides, especially in our debates. I mean, we love to create religious wars out of everything, spaces and tabs. I mean, anything less controversial than that. If you make, yeah, GIF or GIF. Any GIFers in the room? You can leave now too. So, I mean, we love to create these hard battle lines, but naturally, I think with anything, you should pick the tool or the framework, whatever it is that fits the job. And I think when you try to make everything or claim that one thing solves the problem for everyone in every situation, it's a very narrow view of the complexity of the environments in which we work and the projects and the teams even and their skill sets and their history. So NativeScript React Native, I think actually we've reached a very interesting point in these technologies in particular, because I think there are clear reasons why you would pick one over the other to solve a similar problem. And I think there's room to have multiple frameworks for solving similar problems, for appealing to things like, do you use React? Do you use Angular? Do you use Vue? And now there's a kind of clear path why you might choose one or the other. And I think, Sebastian, you're in the middle of this, so it's sort of to the moderator to get the credit here. But these teams working together, the NativeScript team working with the Angular team, and now talking to the React Native team. I mean, this is a consensus now of people trying to solve the same problem, figure out how can we even make it easier for everyone working with these technologies by sharing and collaborating more on the framework level. So I don't think it's winner take all in a lot of these things, certainly not with NativeScript, React Native, and similar technologies.
Pass on this one.
No, you sure? You sure?
I don't want to talk about the NativeScript and React. I just want to highlight something that Todd said, which is, I think, really important, is this consensus between these different kind of working groups, right? So really standards are important because they help us have interoperability, right? And so as we're moving between different frameworks and libraries, right? If you've kind of used Lodash, you kind of maybe know how to use underscore, right? You've used some type of component-based library, maybe it's similar to the other. I think there's some great patterns that are emerging, and I think we're benefiting from that. But one problem I want to highlight in the open source community is that we don't do a good job of answering why, right? Like libraries don't right on the top of the README, it should say, what problem am I solving? Why should you use me, right? And I think that really would help engineers kind of make some better decisions around tooling. So that's something that we all can take responsibility for, like file some issues, add some docs to popular repos. But I think, it can be really overwhelming when you look at all these different tools and you're like, what problem is this one solving versus the other one? And there's definitely a value prop. It's just hidden somewhere in the source code, super deep. So you can't see it, right? And so you ask native core engineers, native script engineers here, they'll tell you why their framework is awesome, right? And what they bring to the table. But it might not really translate into the README. So we can get better at that. So.
Yeah, I want to address on a follow-up to that. I do wish more open source projects, when they're new projects are spawned that are very similar to projects that came before, there would be a clear articulation of what was the reason that the other project couldn't have been adapted to have solved that problem. And it's not like you need to defend the reason of creating new things, but I think there's sort of sometimes we hurt ourselves as developer communities by just constantly starting over and reinventing and throwing the baby out with the bathwater versus improving things that are already good foundations for something else. And sometimes you can't avoid it. I mean, NativeScript and React Native is a case where the early research literally started at the same time. So, some things happen in parallel and you don't have that opportunity. But there's plenty of other cases where I think projects could evolve versus just moving on to the next thing, starting the whole learning cycle over, not building on top of what came before.
Cool. So the next question, so basically the whole idea is that in terms of like how JavaScript evolves, like being on the website and on the mobile side, like it changed drastically, especially in the last 5 to 10 years, where before you were mostly focusing on just maybe the front end, just doing the JavaScript and HTML, but now we're kind of stretching out to like all sort of backends, AI, and like all sort of things. And how do you see yourself like this process evolving into the future? What do you see in the future in the next 5 to 10 years, or maybe further up?
What do we see with JavaScript?
Like the whole ecosystem of like what we use now. What encompasses the process of development and the areas that we touch in order to build a successful website or mobile application. In my opinion, at least, it stretches. So, like, what sort of services do you see like coming into the play?
I'm seeing a need for JavaScript to scale for teams, and I'm seeing TypeScript coming in. It's already in some of the frameworks, but I can see the Vue community especially sort of embracing TypeScript. I think this is going to be sort of a standardization, and I'm sure Amal can talk about this, but something that will make JavaScript a little easier for people to deal with at scale. And this is one tool set that just jumps to my mind.
Honestly, so I'm gonna kind of be the rebel in this panel here and say that like I'm actually really sick of us reinventing the wheel every 5 years in the JavaScript community, in the sense that like it's not the library authors at all, like they're amazing. It's that like it's time for us to really push the web forward, and push projects like these cross-platform app things forward, because ultimately like really we keep reinventing the UI components every few years in different frameworks, and I don't think that's really progress or innovation. No pun intended. But like it's time for us to really think about how we're going to be integrating machine learning into the browser responsibly. What are we doing about security, privacy, performance? There's bigger battles for us to fry. I feel like we've got this down. So I'm frustrated about that personally, and I'd like to see us focus on some like bigger problems. To be honest.
I totally agree with that. I am not the best person to talk about like trends with the ecosystem itself with regards to JavaScript, but what I'm excited about is the new tooling that's coming out for JavaScript to be used for client-side machine learning in like Gmail plugins and like really micro machine learning, and also sort of easily integrated blockchain apps like we talked about in my talk yesterday. So I like seeing languages that evolve over time and that kind of go with the industry movements. And it's really cool. I wish more people were talking about the specifics of what they're doing with JavaScript, especially in this like client-side machine learning stuff. But the capability of the language to be used for like micro, I guess, packages of these typically high-powered and very complex new technologies. I think that's powerful, and we should really lean into that more.
I think I don't have anything on to add as the evolution of JavaScript, but I do think one of the trends that maybe JavaScript helped promote, and which is challenging, especially in the time I've spent over the last decade working in businesses that sell tools and make tools for developers, is that we have kind of had this push of the value of developer tools and software to zero, especially on the things made for developers. Not the software developers make, of course, but the value of a tool. I mean, think about the last time you were asked to pay for a tool. And how many free tools used. Now, those free tools, they're not free. Someone's spending money and investing time, people's time to make them. We've distorted our view of the value of tools because there's some big companies spending a lot of time and money and giving those tools free, which is great. We all benefit from that, mostly. But I do think it also has kind of distorted our view of what the value and the cost of a tool is, and a good tool. And I don't know what the long-term impact of that is. I mean, at some point, who knows what the priorities of a Microsoft or a Google, how they'll shift in their future. But at this point, we've now trained a generation of developers that your tools should not cost you money. Your UI should not cost you money. Someone will give it to you for free. Ideally, you give back. Most people don't. And so as a person who's been involved in the business of making and selling tools, it's sort of an interesting thing to observe. What does that mean for how we value and do this in the future if advertising-based businesses or cloud-selling-based businesses decide developer tools aren't their highest priority in the future? So it's more of an observation of I don't know what it means next, but it is a change that has certainly become more locked in over the last 5 years, especially 5 to 10 years maybe.
That's good. It's good. I actually got a lot more from this question than I expected, which is pretty awesome. So the final question that is from me. So it's more about like how do you structure or format like a development team, or maybe even wider a production team that can deliver successfully the products and the solutions that are needed nowadays? Anyone?
I mean, agile practices have always worked well for the teams I've managed, especially true for globally dispersed teams. We've had the challenges even recently of how you get teams based in the US and Sofia and all over the place to actually work and coordinate and make sure things come out together and on time. So, having good practices and things like agile practices behind that, I think, is really critical. I think from a human, though, scale, it's really important that a team trusts itself. And I think even if you have the best processes and the best intents, if there's bad interpersonal dynamics, if teams don't trust each other, if you can't deliver on your commitments, then no amount of process is going to fix that. So I think there's always value, even when you're spread out remote teams, to have those coming together, those times that create that human trust that then it becomes a foundation for your eventual success. But that's where I'd start.
Yeah, I've been in this great position over the past couple months of actually building such a team, and I like to look at sort of the Wizard of Oz effect. So if I'm Dorothy, and I'm leading this team, who's my scarecrow and who's my, well, all of us are the Cowardly Lion, so we're all courageous and we're just shipping.
But he has no brain.
No, but she's like the brains of the operation at the end of the day, because he does get a brain. That would be my Natalia and my Diana, who has the heart. So it's kind of this dispersal of awesomeness. Kind of skills. If you can get all of those elements, and the biggest question is there a Wizard of Oz? Who's the fake behind the curtain? So maybe that's me. But if you're the lead, then you at least need your brains and your heart.
That's a great analogy, Jen. Jen is actually a founder of like a really incredible movement, like a global movement of like women like learning Vue and Vue Vixens. Look it up I know other engineers that identify as women, like tell them to go to become Vixens. So vuevixens.org, right? So this question, I would say that like hire really good people and get the hell out of their way. That's like really what and also 2 pizzas. Like your team has to be like, teams can work with other teams, but like an individual team that's responsible for singularly delivering a thing should be able to be fed with 2 pizzas. Like any bigger than that, and it's just not productive, So small teams that have power and that are enabled and that don't have people in their way, right? So it's I see this time and time again where you have like really smart engineers that get hired, and then they get like super micromanaged. It's like, why did you hire a senior level principal architect like XYZ thing if you were going to just tell them what to do, right? So that's one. Another thing I see is like this rock star, kind of thing. First of all, like rock star is a gendered word, so please stop using that. Engineers are not rock stars; they're good engineers, right? But anyways, what I see is like people who are trying to hire a team of quote unquote rock stars. Like a team of rock stars isn't going to get anything done. They're just going to sit there and argue about tabs and spaces. Like trust me, like I've seen it. Like they're all getting paid a lot of money, and they're junior engineers that are 10 times more productive than them. So make sure that your skill level is well distributed, right? So you have a good level of entry-level engineers, mid and senior, and that there's growth opportunities for all of the people on your team. So they're motivated and excited to like continue working at your company and on your team, because it's really hard to hire engineers. It's expensive. It's like 6 months before somebody's really productive. So if they're leaving in a year, I mean, what are you really getting out of that person, right? So yeah. So I'd say trust, all of the things said here. But those are just some issues that I see all the time.
Yeah, this is a pretty awesome list of things. I hope somebody's taking this down. I'm trying to keep mental notes in my head. A lot of the things that came to mind immediately for me have been said, but the one thing that I would add is the importance of culture and the importance of allowing your team to bring their own version of that culture and make a culture together, because it goes into trust, it goes into the diversity of thought, and it goes into getting out of people's way. Like the only way that all of these things succeed is if everybody feels some ownership over the team as well. So they feel like they are an equal part in this, like they've brought themselves to the team in some way, and that everybody respects each other for that. Another one piece that I'll add is like make sure that it's not all the same exact type of person. That can mean a lot of different things, but diversity of thought, diversity of background, diversity of gender, everything, it does matter. And especially as product teams that are building things that go out to consumers, we need to represent our consumers on our teams ourselves. So if we're building anything from, a Slack app to AI to whatever it is, if we ourselves are a uniform team, we'll build a product that suits a uniformed audience. And that's not good for this age, because we really need to be looking at global products. So yeah, my two takeaways would be those: diversity and that inclusion aspect of everyone feeling like they can come to work and participate wholly.
To add two things I triggered as we thought about this. One, along those lines of how we need to organize teams and assemble teams. One thing I found to be true over the years is that products definitely reflect the organization of the teams building them. And so if you have a front-end and a back-end team, your product will have a clear front-end and a back-end and a very sort of clear, hard boundary. So make sure you're organizing your teams around the way you want to deliver your products, or you want your products to be experienced. And sometimes that's not as intuitive as it sounds. The other one is make sure your teams know what they're building. And sometimes that also is easily mistaken by developers in particular. I remember going to India once for a conference and meeting someone, and I said, of course, what do you do? And he said, I build websites for rock stars. I was like, whoa, first, that's a great starting point. But what do you really do? He's like, no, really, I build websites for rock stars. They have fans, and our company helps create the fan groups. This was 2005, 2006, before Facebook was really sort of the place you did all that. So I don't think that company exists anymore, but it was cool for a time. But what it got me to think about is he didn't say, I make websites. He didn't say, I write code. He thought in terms of what value his work actually delivered. And I think it's easy as developers to just start to think of what we do as writing code. I ship a website. I create a CLI. Well, yes, but for why? What is it you're really doing? So in the Telerik business, we made UI tools for a long time. Well, that's what we did technically, but what we really did was we helped developers do their jobs a lot faster. We helped them become much more productive doing other things. In fact, we even lost sight of sometimes what they were doing with our tools. And that was really the end goal, like helping people create better experiences for interfacing with customers. I mean, know what value your software work has on the world, and that will change the way you approach what you do and your team's approach to what they will actually debate and what they'll spend time wasting cycles on. Because they will waste cycles.
Nice. So I think we've got a time for a couple of more questions. Do we have any questions from the audience? Raise your hand. And for 1 second. Oh, there's one. All right. Let me come over.
Thanks. I started taking notes just as soon as you said it, so I hope I captured a few of the things. It was all really good points. And actually, I have less of a question, but more of something that I learned at the conference here when we were talking about funding open source and funding tools. I learned about two tools, I guess. One is called Open Collective. Vue has it. I don't know if anyone else has used Open Collective to either get funding or help fund other things, but it seems like it would be something really good to encourage your company to like throw some dollars at the tools that you are already getting a lot of benefit out. Same with another tool called TideLift, which is made in Boston, right?
Startup, yep.
Yeah. Do you know anything about it?
I think also they've talked to the Vue community, so Chris has been talking to TideLift. It's kind of the same business model, I think, slight differences, but it's all just trying to help open source maintainers monetize their efforts and not have to work full time and then burn the midnight oil doing the other stuff.
So mostly just wanted to mention that, and thanks. Great comments all around.
Cool. Anyone else? All right, so I've got one last question, and this one is not very technical, and you're gonna hate me for that. So, what is your spirit animal? As an example, I'll give you mine is a meerkat. I'm a meerkat. What is yours? You have to have one.
Tiger.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I'll answer instead with my Patronus from Harry Potter. Anyone else done the Pottermore quiz for your Patronus? Yeah. Okay. You probably have a cool one. I do not have a cool one. I was expecting like a lion or a unicorn or something. I got a house cat. So apparently my Patronus is a house cat.
It's a lot of character, right?
Yeah, sure.
Garfield.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Jen, you got one?
I don't really have one, but I just love cats so much, so it must have to be something in the feline family. The future is feline, as we know, so.
I don't even know where to begin with this. First, I have to, I guess, have spirits and animals. I have to think through these topics. I have no idea. I've never committed a single brain cycle to my spirit animal, so I will allow it to be assigned to me.
A slot it is.
It was nice working with you, Sebastian.
I know. Okay, it has to be more dangerous animal then. All right, thank you very much. This was amazing. I really enjoyed this panel, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, guys.